What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Chris, the Cavs had back-to-back TV games. My goodness, it feels like forever since we've been able to talk about that because it hadn't happened this season yet, and it was against the Indiana Pacers on Tuesday, and then they have the game against the Oklahoma City Thunder that's already being dubbed the rematch on Thursday. So, Chris, when it comes to, and this is a little off topic based on the Cavs, but when it comes to the ratings of the NBA being down, what's your solution to fixing the problem around the NBA when it comes to viewership, when it comes to ratings, when it comes to getting the best basketball teams in front of their fans and across the world, rather than maybe just having teams named LA, Miami, and New York on the docket?
Okay, so I think this is so multi-layered, and there are so many different ways that we can go with this. I think we have to lay it out like this first and foremost is, the schedule is made in August. Okay? The early season portion of the schedule is probably going to feature teams that NBA schedule makers believe in, saw be successful the year before, or made significant changes in the off season that make them interesting, right? So the early portion of the schedule, I think it's more about interesting. I think it's more about past success, and I think it's less about trying to predict the future. And I don't think it's a surprise that, the Cavs national TV games beyond NBA TV, because that doesn't count. The real national TV games are more in the second part of the schedule, because it was like a hedge your bet sort of thing. You know what I mean? Okay, cool. You went to the Eastern Conference semifinals. All right. You won nearly 50 games again, but are you real? Is that going to hold up? Let's see what it looks like first in the first half of the season. And then the first opportunity that these TV execs got to flex them into, a big time spot against Oklahoma City twice, they were willing to do it. So I think that's part of this equation. The other part of it is, Ethan, I do think there has to be some level of recognition from everybody that makes these decisions that, forget drama, forget market, just try and find, the best, most deserving teams. And if there's anything that we saw from the first game between the Cavs and the Thunder, it's that quality basketball between quality basketball teams, when you're not talking about Jimmy Butler and that nonsense, and you're not talking about the Lakers and some of their nonsense, and you're not talking about all these other things unrelated to the game itself, the product on the floor, that can be good enough. These TV shows, yeah, it's entertaining, and yeah, you're trying to find hot button issues, but in the build up to the game between the Cavs and the Thunder, it was all about the game. It was all about the matchup. It wasn't about drama. It wasn't about trade rumors. It wasn't about, everything else that's going on around the NBA that could potentially happen in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. It was just about the here and now. It was just about the Cavs and the Thunder and how great those two teams are and how great they were going into that matchup. So that's the other part of it. And I think the third layer to this whole thing, Ethan, is that when it comes to ratings in the NBA, I don't think, I think in some ways the NBA is in a really good spot. But the one thing that makes it really, really difficult is that there is no up and coming LeBron James. There is no up and coming Steph Curry. There is no up and coming Kevin Durant. And I'm talking about an American born star that is relatable, that moves the needle, And I think until the NBA finds like that guy, who is that guy that's going to take the torch from those guys when they move on, I think it's going to be a struggle to be at the same level as what the NBA was for the previous 2 decades, basically. Because when LeBron moves on, when KD moves on, when Steph Curry moves on, like who's that guy that's going to carry that torch? Who's that megastar that's going to make you tune in, make you go to games, the guy that you're going to want to see, that you feel like you can't miss watching out? Like, who is that? I
So,
don't know
Chris,
that that player exists.
right. And so that gets into our last topic. And I think you perfectly kind of weaved us into it without even knowing you were doing it. Look at that. Look at that. But, Chris, I want to argue with you on something because
Okay.
I think the Cavs, not the Cavs, I think the NBA has kind of begun to develop the next wave of the stars of the NBA, right? They've tried with some of these players, and I feel like they've kind of tried to have these three different avenues. You have LeBron, you have KD, you have Steph. And I think the most difficult one for them right now is the Stephen Curry one. So let me walk you through where I'm at beforehand. So LeBron James, I think his potential replacement, American born, somebody that can move the needle, somebody that is relatable, somebody that is likable among the media, that might have a little less media training than LeBron James at this point in his career. Anthony Edwards. That's where I would go. Somebody who can jump out of the gym, somebody that has a bigger stature, somebody that all those different things, right? And to me, this is not saying that KD, Steph, LeBron, that their careers are like able to be made again. Like those three guys are some of the most accomplished in NBA history. LeBron James at the pinnacle of the league, making almost every career statistic his own. And then Kevin Durant and Stephen Curry kind of revolutionizing the NBA and changing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the next option is then Kevin Durant. You got Victor Wembanyama, a 7 foot guy who can shoot from the perimeter, who can dribble, who can post up, who can do a lot of different things that don't look normal for a guy at his size. And I think that's a
Yeah.
similar comparison that has been made for Kevin Durant throughout his entire career. And then you get to the hardest one. And I think it's Stephen Curry because not only because of how he revolutionized the game and changed it to make every player on the court feel like they have to have a 3 pointer in their arsenal, and how he can just change a lead from being monumental to very small in a course of probably 2 minutes in a basketball game, as Chris says, making any lead not safe. But I feel like
Mm-hmm.
if there's one guy that I would compare him to, and it's interesting because it's more so about the trajectory that they're on career wise, it's Darius Garland. Because you look at where Darius has been from the beginning of his career, and you look at where that compares to what Stephen Curry has gone through. And I'm gonna run through some stats for you before I let you rebuttal. Through the first 5 seasons of Stephen Curry's career, 2009 to 2014, he was the runner-up for Rookie of the Year, 11th in MVP voting in 2012, 2013, 6th in MVP voting 2013, 2014. He had just 2 winning seasons. He had 2 playoff appearances. He had 1 playoff series win. He was bounced from the first round in 2013, 2014. He had 3 different coaches. He had 2 ankle surgeries and 1 season of just 26 games and only 1 season averaging under 15 points per game. Listen to how similar this sounds for the first 5 seasons of Darius Garland's career. He was an all-star in 2021, 2022. He had that on Steph. He had 3 winning seasons. He had 2 playoff appearances. He had 1 playoff series win. Obviously, we know that to be the Orlando Magic series last year. He was bounced from the first round in 2022, 2023 against the New York Knicks. He's played for 2 coaches. He's dealt with a fractured jaw, and he's had 1 season averaging under 15 points a game. So when you look at all of those things and you look at the flair, the creativity, and the biggest thing for me is that Darius and Steph aren't physical specimen. Like they're 6'1", 6'2", able to create, able to do so much with the ball in their hands, and still they're able to be fun for fans to watch and even more relatable in that sense, rather than someone like LeBron and Anthony Edwards or Kevin Durant and Victor Wembanyama. What do you think about this?
The Darius thing to me is a little bit complicated. And I think there are a couple of things that he's going to continue to run into. Number one, he is not going to get the spotlight and he's not going to get the platform as long as he's got Donovan Mitchell on his team. It's just the truth. This is Donovan Mitchell's team. This is Donovan Mitchell's city. Donovan Mitchell has the shoe deal. Donovan Mitchell is the marketable one. Donovan Mitchell is the bona fide superstar. And I think Darius is always going to be in Donovan's shadow for as long as Donovan remains in the prime of his career. So that's issue number one. And that doesn't mean that Darius isn't great. It doesn't mean that Darius isn't magnetic. It doesn't mean that Darius isn't charismatic. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have a fun style, because he does. That's issue number one is the Donovan Mitchell shadow. And it's something that Darius, as long as he wins, I don't think he's all that bothered by it. And it's not something that Donovan did on purpose, but he's got more of a chance to be the next face of the NBA, based on everything that he has accomplished and based on the standing that he has already gotten to, more so than Darius does. Here's the second thing. When it came to Steph did something to a level that nobody else in the NBA could do. Nobody else in the NBA could reach. He is quite possibly the greatest shooter of all time. He is no doubt the greatest shooter of the last decade. And he transformed the game. He revolutionized the game, because what he was doing, nobody else could do to the same level. There were teams that had to pick him up as soon as he got across half court. There were teams that were willing to give up layups in transition because they weren't going to leave Steph. His movement, that was something that you just didn't see. For the time that Steph reached his prime and turned Golden State into what it was before Kevin Durant arrived and kind of they had to share the spotlight there. Steph had already established himself. Steph had already turned himself into an MVP. Then it was just about boosting that resume. But when it comes to Darius, and I don't mean this in a negative way, and I don't want this to come across as I don't think he has a great season, or he's had a great career, or he's one of the best young players, certainly at his position in the NBA. But we're talking about becoming the face of the NBA. So it has to be an honest conversation, and it has to, it's a meaningful conversation too. And sometimes that means you have to be a little bit harsh. And sometimes the truth hurts. What does Darius do that nobody else in the NBA can do? What separates Darius from everybody else?
I think it will be his dribbling more than anything. I definitely think it's his twitchiness and his ability to stop, start, but also make music while he plays, I guess is how I would describe it. But I get what you're saying when you talk about how Steph's shooting, I keep saying, revolutionized basketball. Nobody is Steph because of what he brought in that aspect. But I definitely think it's more of a relatability thing for me.
So here's the other thing. Is Darius Garland better than Trae Young to this point in his career? Trae Young can do everything that Darius can do. Trae Young was supposedly the next Steph Curry because of his deep range, because of his passing, because of his gamesmanship and his showmanship. And he's already got the signature established. He already has a brand established. It's Ice Trae. So What does Darius do that Trae Young can't do? And Trae Young has been more accomplished and he's been arguably a better player than Darius. So they play the same position, they play the same style, but Darius doesn't do it to the same level as Trae. Like Trae's not going anywhere, right? And I know that maybe he's not as likable because of like some of the past things that have come up about how he interacts with employees inside the arena and other things that have come out about his teammates and do coaches in the NBA respect him and like him. But if we're talking about just like skill set and flair and charisma and magnetism and talent and production and all those different things, because like when we're talking about superstar and we're talking about face of the NBA, like this is an entertainment business. You have to be entertaining, hero or villain. Trae Young has played the villain role really, really well. He has already like adopted that and he has a brand all to himself. And to this point throughout his career, he has accomplished more than Darius and he's been a more consistent and a better player than Darius. And that's just like one example, right? Like, what does Darius Garland do better than Jalen Brunson? So it's like when you have Steph separated himself from everybody in the NBA and everybody at the position. And I just think like Darius, yeah, he's going to get overshadowed by his own teammate in Donovan Mitchell. He's also going to get overshadowed by other guys that have a bigger stage and a bigger platform than him that have already accomplished more than him to this point. Jalen Brunson's not going anywhere, right? Like Trae Young's not going anywhere. Anthony Edwards isn't going anywhere. So I think those are the main issues that Darius could run into. Like, do you close your eyes and ever envision him being a top 5 player in the NBA or a top 10 player in the NBA? I don't know that I can do that. It's very hard for me to do that right now.
So just a rebuttal on the Trae Young thing.
Sure.
I do think that there were more similarities when Trae Young came into the league between Steph and Trae because of his astronomical shooting. That's something that everybody knew about Trae since his high school days, since going through college, all of those things. But I think also to be a star in the NBA, to be a face of the NBA, you have to win games. And as much as Trae Young might have a bigger platform and a bigger marketability with the branding that he's created for himself, as you said, hero or villain, villain is the role that he chose. I definitely think that when you look at Steph Curry's early career, because again, it's relatability, how the two kind of match up early in their careers, it took until Steph's 6th season in the NBA for him to win a championship. Darius Garland's in his 6th season. Darius Garland is arguably having a better season than Donovan Mitchell this year and leading the Cavs to a potential first championship. Obviously, this is still to be heard, to be seen, all of those different things. But I think even if Donovan is the face of the franchise, which he is, that's not arguable, I think Darius Garland's relatability, one, Darius Garland being 24, going to turn 25 in 12 days when this podcast releases, gives him a better advantage to be a face of the NBA than 28-year-old Donovan Mitchell, who, to this point, as we know, is still dealing with some kind of knee issues that could hinder the later half of his career. And as we know, Anthony Edwards, 23 years old. Victor Wembanyama, 21 years old. Trae Young, 26 years old. So for me, all of these things combine into this conversation, and I'm not going to argue that Jalen Brunson has some stardom to him, right? And some ability, but I feel like his game isn't as pretty. His game isn't as it's I'm gonna get into you, I'm gonna get the mid range, I'm gonna get to the bucket, all these other things. There's not much showmanship when it comes to Jalen Brunson. Darius Garland has added the kiss to the sky, right? That is
Right.
something that he marketed and started after talking to Tristan Thompson in New York, in
Mhm.
Madison Square Garden, and he's done that every game since, and that's become his trademark. And I think that's also a sign of a growing star. Like everybody remembers Carmelo Anthony, the three to the head. Everybody remembers LeBron James, the silencer. D Wade, this is my house. All these other things,
Yeah.
and
No,
marketability is something that Darius, I think, is working on, even if it might not be as noticeable to the common eye. But I do
yeah.
think that Darius, as much as there are other layers to this that I agree with you on that might make the conversation more difficult, I definitely think that he is growing in every aspect that he needs to be on that trajectory if he's not there yet.
He's definitely growing. There's no doubt about it. This version of Darius Garland is a lot different than I think any other version of Darius that we saw. It's very close to his All-Star season, but I think there's a level of consistency that he is showing. And one of the things that he has is the 50-40-90 chase. That's interesting to people. That resonates with people. That kind of separates him from other people because not many guys, if he can do it, if he can finish it off, not many people in NBA history have been in that group. That is an elite fraternity. That is an exclusive fraternity. So he has been really, really good this year for the Cavs, and he's been a big reason why they are the best team in the NBA. And he deserves a lot of credit for bouncing back from, what he even characterized as one of the most difficult years of his entire life, not just one of the most difficult years of his NBA career or his basketball career, one of the most difficult years of his entire life, given everything that he dealt with. So to see him, the way that he played last year and how lost at times it felt like he was last year, and then to see him, the maturity that he's showing within the game, um, the next level that he has taken his game to with making the next pass and not turning the ball over and the stop and start and understanding how to best, dissect a defense and process the game as it's going on. Like an example, the other night against Toronto, he had been getting into the paint and hitting those floaters and getting to the rim and finishing around the rim. And then late in the game, Toronto was expecting him to do that. And he hit Scotty Barnes with pullback move and he made the three. Like that was an advanced play. That was recognizing everything that led up to that moment in the game and what he thought was going to work best for him based on how the game was unfolding. So there's a different maturity to Darius this year as well. I think there's a different professionalism to Darius this year as well. And he deserves all the credit in the world for that. And this was a big year for him. And he took the step that he needed to take, the step that he wanted to take last year, getting himself back into the All-Star conversation, getting himself into a conversation of one of the best players in the NBA at his position. All of that is great. He's not popular. He's not. People, for whatever reason, he doesn't resonate with people. For whatever reason, he doesn't have the fans. You, did you ever see Gladiator?
Of course.
The original Gladiator. What was
I,
one of what was one of the first messages that was delivered to Maximus in that movie?
now I'm blanking. I haven't seen it in
Win the
so long.
crowd.
Win the
Win the
crowd.
crowd. Win the crowd. Darius hasn't won the crowd. And it's evident in the All-Star voting with the fan returns. The first fan returns, he's outside the top 10 of guards in the Eastern Conference. He's like 25th among guards in the entire NBA. That was the first returns. And now he is
Ninth.
ninth. So barely cracking the top 10. The fans are speaking and saying, for whatever reason, we like LaMelo more. We like Donovan Mitchell more. We like Darius Garland or Damian Lillard more. We like Jalen Brunson. We like Trae Young. We like Cade Cunningham. We like Jordan Poole more. You know what I'm saying? So, like, he and he's obviously working on this, and you're writing a story on this clearly, but like he hasn't won the crowd. He just hasn't. Maybe he has to do it more consistently. Maybe he has to do it on the playoff stage. Maybe he has to continue to incorporate a little bit more flair in his game. Maybe he has to switch from New Balance to somewhere. I don't know. But he hasn't won the crowd. And until he does that, like how could I sit here and say like he would be the next person to potentially bring the NBA into a new era when he's the ninth according to fan voting in All-Star, and this, this is only a part of it, right? But it's part of the conversation, and not every fan is going to vote for All-Star. They're not going to like pull up their phone, or they're not going to go to Twitter, so there's some NBA fans that just aren't going to take the time to vote for All-Star. But like in terms of All-Star voting, he's the ninth most popular guard in the Eastern Conference. Look at
Yep.
look at Shea.
Yep.
Look at Steph. Still. Look at Ant. Look at LaMelo. Look at Trey. They're all way further along than he is when it comes to just popularity and winning the crowd.
And I think that's a good point. And I
I
think
just wanted to mention Gladiator because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Anytime
it,
that I can mix that in there, I will find an opening to do that.
it is a great movie. And I think you make a good point about winning the crowd, because I feel like, as unfair as it might be to Darius, the last couple of years, I mean, being labeled the worst player in the
Yeah.
NBA after his rookie season sticks with you. Like,
Yeah.
there are people that solely, like, we've had people come back and listen to the podcast and wonder who the hell I am, because they were so used to listening to Hayden, right? Like, they haven't listened to the podcast in a year and a half or whatever, and they come back and they're like, who is this guy? Like,
Yeah.
that is sometimes how fans consume the NBA. Like, and if you look back to just 2 years ago, the New York Knicks series, and then last year, the Boston Celtics, Orlando Magic, fractured jaw, all the worst season, the worst year of his life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that is what people are remembering in the back of their head. They're not seeing, hey, they're 33-5. Oh, they think Donovan Mitchell. Okay. So I think it's definitely interesting for that conversation to be had. But when you're talking about a guy like Darius Garland, who
Mm-hmm.
is elevating his game to a different level, to a different standard, even than when he played in an All-Star game already in his career, I feel like it is worth, and it will happen if it continues. Again, this is the beginning of the trajectory that we were talking about. I think if Darius continues this play, his fandom will rise as he continues, because the reputation, as Chris likes to say, is very hard to change. But if you continue to give them a reason to change the reputation, that will happen. Again, if they go to the NBA Finals this year, again, up in the air, we'll see what happens. This is not saying that they're winning the NBA Finals, but
Mm-hmm.
if they do that, like, that's going to give a different perception from fans that were like, we can't beat the New York Knicks because we're too soft. Like, that's where we're at in the journey of Darius Garland and comparison to Stephen Curry, because of all of those different things. And I think you make some great points of other people that are in the conversation. All I'm saying is I think Darius Garland should also be in that conversation.
There's one last point to make, and it came out immediately after the Cavs lost to the Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinals. There is a reason that Darius's people like sat down with the Cavs and discussed the possibility of finding him a new home in the NBA. And it's not because, they didn't believe in the direction of the Cavs. It's not because like they were ardent JB Bickerstaff supporters. It's not because like they didn't believe that Darius could win in Cleveland. It's because sharing the spotlight with somebody can be difficult. when you're trying to, create your own brand, when you're trying to be more marketable, when you're trying to elevate your profile to a different kind of place. And this isn't Darius. This isn't Darius talking. It's his people who are kind of like responsible for looking out for those things, for paying attention to those things, for monitoring those things, and for trying to do whatever it is they feel is best for their client. And they looked at the situation and said, look, if Donovan comes back, like the things that we would want for Darius out of his career, the things we believe that he should get out of his career, they're not going to be possible, not to the level that we want, not in Cleveland. And it wasn't about market. And like I said, it wasn't about like get him on the playoff stage. It wasn't about, can he win there? It was about all these other things that we're having a conversation about. And I know Darius is his own person, and Darius is all about winning, and he hates losing, especially given somebody who came into the NBA, and came into a situation with the Cavs that they were at the bottom. They were the laughing stock of the NBA. They were rebuilding. Like you mentioned, he was labeled the worst player in the NBA, and the Cavs were absolutely nothing. They were irrelevant when he came into the NBA. So he had to go through all those dark times. He had to go through the worst portions of a rebuild in order to get to this point. So he appreciates winning more. He loves winning. But there's a reason why his people sat down with the Cavs organization and said, is there something that we can do about this? Is there a place where you could send him that would be more beneficial to us? Like, there's a reason why they wanted out.
And Chris, I think that's a great point. And I think that might be what you were mentioning with coming into the league and being in the darkest times of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I believe that might be the biggest difference between the way that Steph and Darius kind of started their careers, because Steph was the kid from Davidson that came onto the scene and everybody was looking to see if he was going to change the game. And that's the craziest part about Steph. And just to give him and LeBron his credit, LeBron came in being the one, the chosen one, and lived up to that. Like Klay Thompson, and I'm going to talk about him in a second. Klay Thompson mentioned after scoring 16,000 points the other day, was like, do you understand how crazy that sounds that LeBron has 40,000? And then Steph coming in and being the kid from Davidson, and people were suggesting he might be the next person to take the reins of the best shooter in the NBA, and then living up to that. Two players that in this generation that we've gotten to witness that have not only lived up to the expectations that were so high, but exceeded them, that's unheard of. So obviously, again, these are all just topics of discussion that we're talking about at the days of infancy of these discussions. But and this is where I'll end this conversation. Stephen Curry had Klay Thompson, right? They were marketed as the Splash Brothers. It was Steph and Klay. And I think that's part of the way that Donovan has been able to keep this together. And
one guy went Under Armour. The other guy went with a shoe brand I've never heard of. Okay.
Oh, man.
There are levels to this.
Right.
You're right. It was the Splash Brothers. But Steph was up here, way up here. And Klay was getting shoe deals from Anta.
Well, you're right. But I'm saying they were still marketed together. And although Klay was much that was my next point. Somebody's got to be Klay. Of a dynamic, somebody's got to be Klay. It doesn't matter if you're here and here, or here and here, or here and here. Somebody's got to be option B, right? And in the Donovan Darius dynamic right now, it's Donovan Darius, and that's the understanding that Donovan in every if you search up on any platform Darius and Donovan, the first picture I bet you I put money on it. It's them hugging. It could be this year, it could be
Uh-huh.
last year. Like they're hugging or cheering at each other or yelling at each other, like in a positive manner, obviously. But like I think Donovan hearing those rumors or those conversations had by Darius's people took it upon himself to say, as he was saying all of last year, I believe in him. I
Oh,
want
sure.
him here. I want
Oh,
to
sure.
create this foundation that we have because I believe we can be one of the best backcourts in the NBA. And he's not only shown that in how he's talked about him off the court, talked about Darius to us, but he's shown that in his play this year as well, getting off the ball, allowing him to do his maestro mastery, all the other things you want to talk about Darius Garland. It is in part because of what Donovan Mitchell has been able to do himself. Same thing, Steph Clay. The things Clay was able to do is a lot of the reason because people were running around chasing Steph, and you have to pick your poison. That's where the Cavs are trying to get. So that's where I'll end this conversation and argument. Is there are levels to this, but I again think when the conversation is had, we've talked about it, where LeBron James is like. It could be Anthony Edwards, it could be Jason Tatum, it could be those guys that are physical specimen, and then Victor Wembanyama and KD, aliens, right?
Hmm.
Unicorn, alien, whatever you want to call them. Steph Curry's replacement, not a replacement. Nobody replaces Steph Curry, but like the next guy that's gotta like be like act like create like Steph Curry is gotta be a guard or somebody that fans who are not 6'5" and above can relate to. And to me, based on the trajectory of their careers, Darius Garland needs to be in that conversation.
He's just got to do something, Ethan, that separates himself, that puts him in that conversation. Steph came into the NBA and he had the whole Davidson thing. He got the NCAA tournament and he just wowed everybody. He won the crowd. He wowed every. Who doesn't remember Steph and taking little Davidson with a bunch of other white dudes through an NCAA tournament run? A bunch of white dudes that didn't belong against the teams that they were playing against. Through an NCAA tournament run with miraculous shot making, with unbelievable range. Like, he had that coming into the NBA. And then that translated to the NBA, right? Like, Trae Young, for whatever you want to say about him, he has the going into Madison Square Garden, going on a deep playoff run where it was him, like where he was making those big shots, where he was making those big plays, where he was doing the ice tray thing throughout a miraculous run that nobody saw coming from the Atlanta Hawks. But it happened because of him. LaMelo has TikTok. Like, how do you compete with TikTok? But he also has
Well,
like,
TikTok's going away, Chris. So he doesn't have too much longer.
excuse me, he'll find another social media avenue to put his stuff there. But like, he also has like the uniqueness of his name. He's a Ball brother, and he was like the most exciting Ball brother coming up, and not always for all the right reasons, but still exciting that people like wanted to stream high school games to watch this dude play. They wanted to watch him play overseas to see what it was all about, right? Like, there was just something magnetic about him that you streamed high school games to watch him play because all you heard was like, oh my God, this dude does crazy things on the court. And he takes these one-footed shots when he gets across half court, and he can make threes that very few guys that we have seen at this level can make. Like, he did something, right? Um, Damian Lillard, he did something. Think about, he put the Portland Trailblazers back on the map as an organization. Um, Jalen Brunson, he did something. Like, for whatever you want to say about him and the style of play and foul hunter and all those different things, like, he became the face of the New York Knicks. Like, think about that, Mr. New York. Are you kidding me? There's star power there. there's an attractiveness there. There's something that resonates with people there. And then you keep going down the list, and it's like, has Darius done any of that? Anything like that? Like, is his claim to fame at this point in time? Like, winning the skills competition thing with the Cavs at All-Star Weekend when it was like the Cavs hitting the half court, whatever they call that. What is that even called? Shooting stars? I
The
think it's
skills
called.
competition. It's the skills
No,
competition.
no, no, no. The one with like all the teammates. Because Evan Mobley was a part of it and Jared Allen was a part of it.
I
Remember the one
thought it
where they
was.
have like.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I
That's
thought
called
it
the
was
skills. No, that's
I
not
thought it,
called the skills competition. The skills competition is the individual one where there's passing and there's shooting and there's dribbling involved. I'm talking about the one with like there are 4 teams. They're all teammates. Um, and the Cavs won that one. And like it kind of like lit up the entire arena. And I'm not saying this to be mean again. I'm just saying this to be honest and to put it in perspective and to be real. Like, I don't know at this point in time what is synonymous with Darius Garland.
sorry, I'm over here trying to figure out what the damn thing is called.
What's it? I think it's called Shooting Stars. I really do.
All-Star Skills Challenge results. Evan
Mm,
Mobley for the win. Yeah. NBA All-Star Skills Challenge results highlights Evan Mobley comes up clutch to give Team Cavs victory. I'm
Team
telling you.
Cavs.
Yeah. I'm telling you,
Team
it's the skills
Cavs.
challenge in 2022. The new format.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
But
So I was wrong on that.
yeah, it happens. Anyway,
So what's the one called where they individually go through and they dribble around the cones and then they
I think that was the new format. The new format was
Oh,
3 play, but it used to be the skills challenge when it was just one person. I remember watching that back in the day. I think it was like Chris Paul who did it. Like yeah, like that
oh,
was
okay.
just one person. But I think the new
I got you.
format was like teams, so it wasn't like the fastest player in the league's gonna win it every time.
All right, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, but
Nonetheless,
yeah,
point remains. Like, what is his signature moment? What is synonymous with Darius Garland at this point?
right.
When you think Darius Garland, what do you think of? And do you have any of those things that I just mentioned with those other guys? To this point, no, right? Like
No,
Donovan Mitchell has playoff Spida. Donovan Mitchell has playoff Spida from early in his career, and then what he did in the bubble.
I agree because I think it's you because I was looking at the All Star list and I'm running down this
Mm-hmm.
list and it's Donovan Mitchell, Spider, Damian Lillard, Dame Time, Jalen Brunson, King of New York, Trey Young, Ice Trey,
Kate
Jordan Poole,
Cunningham's motorcade.
Motorcade, Jordan Poole Party. Um,
Yeah.
so I definitely think like we were talking about earlier, everybody has their trademark, whether it's a celebration, whether it's a name, whether it's all these different things, and I think it's a start for Darius Garland to have the kiss to the sky as his signature. It's a
Mm-hmm.
beginning.
I think
Hopefully,
it's a
some
fascinating conversation, though. Honestly, I do, and I think it's one that other people around the NBA are having, and I know that players in NBA locker rooms are having it as well about like who takes the torch from LeBron, from Steph, from KD, and they have their own opinions on it. And it's fascinating, I think, to hear a lot of the players discuss it. Go on.
yeah, and I think what I'm writing about, and I think it's I didn't want to get too far into this because one, it's very nuanced and it's more nerdy, but like
Mm-hmm.
the fact that Darius Garland, the thing that it will take Darius Garland to the next level and be closer to what Steph did is what goes on behind the scenes. His workout regimen, his recovery, his strength being put back on, and how he's utilized those different things, whether it's taking punishment on the defensive end and seeking out the best matchup on each night, guarding Steph Curry, helping out on Jason Tatum, switching, being able to be implemented in those different schemes that Kenny Atkinson has created, or going on the offensive end and, like you said, not shying away from contact while driving to the basket and even dishing out some of his punishment of his own, while also being able to have the creativity on the exterior, on the perimeter to dribble, create, and also have success from beyond the arc. 50, 40, 90 is within reach. He would become
Okay.
just the 10th person in NBA history to reach 50, 40, 90. So if you want to say what is
There you go.
what you remember about Darius, that would be it. And that would not only
Yes.
elevate the conversation, but it would also just be like, hey, this is something that I've done that nobody, almost nobody else in the league has done. Stephen Curry's
Yes.
done it. Kevin Durant's done it. So these are real conversations that we're having, and I like the back and forth. I just think it's definitely a
That would be
conversation
his
worth
thing,
having.
though. You're right. That would be his something.
I think it's time to finally get out of here. So, with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your questions for our weekly Hey Chris episode. So, to do that, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.